Welcome to everybody. There we go. I'm Brian Jones, and here, let me just do this. Okay. So I'm Brian Jones, and I'm just absolutely delighted that you have taken some time out of your day to all come together and have an experience together of something profound, which we will do in the second half of this session. You are attending likely because you are a reader of Quora, and you've probably read some of my writings on Quora. I've been writing on there for about 7 years now about topics of spirituality and meditation and the mysterious enlightenment and awakening and all of that other stuff. So anyway, so we've been doing these sessions now since I think probably January, and they keep growing. And if you're attending for the first time, what I'd like to say is to tell you about the format, which is on Saturday, it's unique. On Saturday, I take up a topic for about 30 minutes, and then we meditate together using yogic transmission of heartfulness for 30 minutes. Then we take a 5-minute break and we go off camera, and anyone who wants to can come back and grab a coffee or tea, come back, and then we hang out more casually and have questions and answers and whatever. So that's the format. So a little bit about me is that I've been meditating for a long time. I started when I was 12. Won't go into that whole story, but I began the type of meditation I do now. I started when I was 18 years old, and so it's been about 45, 46 years now. I've been practicing what's now called heartfulness meditation. I've been a trainer for many decades now. There's a lot of different types of meditations out there. And I always recommend on Quora, I tell people, try out many different things and also try out heartfulness. And just see which one works for you and resonates with you the most. And that's really the best way to take up a practice of meditation. Now, the thing I will add is that it's very hard to take up a practice of meditation on your own. And so what we've been doing here is not really a focus on, me telling you, oh, here's how you do the meditation, and, okay, now you know how, and go off and do it. Because that most of the time that doesn't work. So instead, what we do here is we say, can we all take 1 hour a week and come together and have a wonderful experience of this unity, camaraderie, and a deep experience of samadhi and meditation. We can all manage 1 hour. And I think what people have found, and I will later on in the the question and answer session, others can speak to this, is that I think what you find is that it's easier to learn to meditate. It's easier to go deep into meditation. And then as you are having your own inner deep experience, then you want to increase that experience and learn the practice and start doing it on your own. So that's the way we go at it here. So not an emphasis on, this is not a beginner class on meditation. It's not a how-to. I usually dive into some deep topics, but it's all about your personal experience. It's about your experience. And that's what we want you to have. So today I'm going to talk about something that I haven't really touched on before. And before I talk about it, I'm going to speak from my experience, as I always do, and tell you that something is going on. At least I'll speak for myself. For me, the past 3 days, I feel like suddenly there's been another one of who knows how many great letting goes. Just a great letting go. And I feel so, I don't know, so simple and so, there's nothing to B, there's nothing to really prove. You know, I felt this so many times throughout my journey. And that's why we call it a journey, is because, you know, on a journey, there's times we're climbing uphill, and there's times when we level out for a while. And then there's times when we, you know, can cruise downhill, and that's always fun and nice. And then there's yet another hill to climb. And, you know, meditation is a lifelong process for us. Our spiritual journey, it's a lifelong process. And there's innumerable times when things will come up for us from our past impressions, samskaras, deep-rooted things. And then, you know, they cause us some grief for a while, but then we buckle down with our practice. And then all of a sudden, one day, it's just like we've had a breakthrough. So this is a path that's kind of like a spiral like this. And at each intersection of these on any side, we repeat the same patterns that come up for us. But as we're higher on the spiral, those patterns have less and less of a pull on us as we're becoming lighter and lighter. And we also have gained the wisdom to recognize patterns in ourselves that come up. And then we're capable of making new and better choices and say, aha, I know you, and I'm just not going to participate in you anymore. And this is the way it goes, because this path is a journey of thought. It's a journey of thought. It's a journey of identity. That's the spiritual path. Who do I think I am? Who do I think God is? Who do I think, you know, what do I think spirituality is? Who do I think you are? You know, it's all this interrelational thing that eventually, when we, you know, reach the peak of the mountain, then we all stand at the same peak. We all have the same view. We're all individuals still, but we all see from the same place. And that's what the journey is about. So, and that's a great simplicity of being. So today I want to talk about grace. I have not talked about it, and I'm going to talk about that, and I'm going to talk about transmission. And transmission is something we experience every time we come together and have a group meditation. There is always transmission. And the transmission is hard to explain, as you've heard me say over and over again, but it's a bit wondrous and a bit mysterious, but it's something that we can feel the effects of it. And just for those of you who are new, I will say that the transmission is something that's a higher, much higher frequency of the mind, that the mind is like the ocean, which has always some ripples on it. And sometimes storms roll in and the waves get really big. And that's our life experiences. And the clouds come in and the big storms brew. And this is the story of our life, is our mind. We are what we think in our mind. But the transmission is like the light of the sun, which is above, way above the storm, way above the clouds. It's a constant. And it dissipates the clouds and will eventually clear the storms. And we can start to associate and connect with that steady state of the sun's light instead of the mind's intermittent frequencies. Okay, so this is how yogic transmission helps us to go balance the mind. The mind welcomes it, and when the mind settles down, we can go very deep and beautiful states inside. Now, that's transmission. So that's unique to heartfulness. Now, sometimes I've heard the masters in this method, there's been 4 masters, I've heard them all mention the word grace. And, you know, coming from a Christian background when I was a kid, you know, my parents were Christian, you know, grace was a common word in those days. And when we think of grace, it's like something comes over us at any time. And we feel a transformation, or we feel a blessing, or we feel blessed. And Babaji clarifies the difference between transmission and grace. He said that, yes, transmission is itself a type of grace in that, we receive it irrespective of whether we're deserving or not. Deservingness is not a requirement to receive transmission and be transformed, because the nature of the prana or transmission is that it by its nature returns things to their original state. So we can look at that and say, wow, it's grace, but it operates in a steady way, okay, as we practice and as we open ourselves to receive more and more. Grace, Babaji said, he said something like, one moment of grace is worth 500 transmissions, or something like that, he said. One moment of grace. And in my own life, I think I can only recall maybe one time that I knew for certain that I was receiving grace. And I was down in my basement of all places. And I was just working on something, and I wasn't thinking anything spiritual or anything in particular. I was just kind of in a nice mood, and I was working at my workbench doing something. And in one moment, I felt this just, I can't even describe it, what that felt like, because I experienced the transmission all the time. But this grace was just like, oh, wow. I just felt so blessed, and so something pouring on me in such a beautiful way. And afterwards, I felt such a transformation. Now, Babaji says that we can attract grace towards ourselves. And he says, interestingly, he says that the way we attract grace is by our lightness and a sense of happiness and lightness actually attracts yet which is beyond that. So on this path, this journey, we're proceeding towards lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter levels of consciousness. Why? Because we've become embodied now in this dense form, but we're actually still the original self is light. We're just a light, just light. And that was the birth of all the beings of this universe. And as we become lighter and lighter, and we really feel that within ourselves as lightness, we can attract even that which is beyond that. Because Babaji has said an interesting thing. He talks about this progression. He said that, he puts it like this. He said, where religion ends, spirituality begins. Where spirituality ends, reality begins. Where reality ends, bliss begins. And where bliss ends, that's really the start of our journey. So you can see how much work we have to do, not in achieving something, but in letting go and being okay with being who we are right now. We can't be anyone other than who we are. So we're both sort of growing into our ultimate self, and we're growing into that by getting rid of the things which weigh us down. So I want to touch on this again, and for those of you who were here the past couple of weeks, I've touched on this, but I want to bring it up again. If, you've all been on Quora, we've all read a lot of things, and we know that, the topic of enlightenment is a big topic. And what a beautiful word. What a beautiful word, enlightenment. But it almost implies something that has to happen to us. But, we are already beings of light. So this enlightenment idea is rather kind of a funny idea that we have, that we think that we hold it as an objective or a goal that we're moving towards. And yet, is it really that? What is really the what is really the objective right now for our spiritual evolution? Is it even something we call enlightenment? Well, I want to share something that Daji is the current spiritual guide of heartfulness, that he's talked about quite a lot. And it's something evolutionary. It's something that you will not hear talked about on Quora. And it's the fact that what really we're doing is by clearing ourselves of our past impressions, cleaning ourselves of the past impressions, and by receiving this transmission, which is returning us to our simple self, what we're doing is we're purifying what's called the subtle body within. Our subtle body within is some people refer to it as our energetic body. I don't know, that's kind of a funny word too. Some people refer to it as just the soul. But subtle body is a good way of thinking about it. And subtle body contains 4 things: consciousness, mind, ego, and intellect. Our subtle body contains those 4 things. So it's a subtle, container that's when it comes into the field of time. When the soul enters the field of time, this subtle body comes into being. And therefore, because we're existing in the field of time, we're enabling ourselves to have a mind, because a mind only works in a field of time. So in the process, what we're really striving to do spiritually is we're striving to purify the subtle body to such an extent that we become enter this phase like a cocoon, and we basically dissolve our previous ideas of ourselves, our previous concepts and opinions. And we go through a metamorphosis, and we don't really even know we're going through it. But then, like the moth in the cocoon goes through that metamorphosis, comes out, and is able to now exist as a butterfly in a totally different dimension. It's no longer an earthbound thing. It no longer has to crawl along. It's now gone through a metamorphosis, dissolved itself, remade itself as a butterfly, and now it exists. It can fly. It's flying in another dimension. So I've talked about this before. I wanted to bring it up again because that is what we're really doing. We're creating another body for ourselves in a higher dimension, where when we leave this world, we then become awake into that body. And then that is our next existence. Here we have a life. Okay, life means we born, live, die. Existence is an infinite thing. So when we have our existence in this new body that we're creating for ourselves, this is how we break not only this cycle of rebirths, but we totally break the chain of time, and we're free. And there's no reason for us to come back into a field of time unless we should so choose to, in which case we would come back awake as an awakened being. Once we achieve to that, we're not falling back down from that. So while there are many other viewpoints about what we're supposed to be doing here and attaining the mysterious enlightenment, actually, from my experience of a long time, I can share with you that this is the objective for us. And it makes a lot of sense because it's evolutionary. And we are on an evolutionary journey. If we look at a seed, in order for seed to grow, the seed must die. And then it sprouts, becomes a small shoot, and then it becomes taller, becomes a sapling, and then eventually becomes an old oak tree. So its growth, its evolution is only in one direction. So we're here to optimize our growth, our evolution forward into this new higher existence. And at the same time that all this is happening, I will say that the spiritual masters who are already from that state, they are bringing about all of the conditions in the world that have never happened before, that make it so easy for us to go from here to there, even while we're still here in this body, while we're still alive. We can experience and become that within ourselves. And that is how this world is going to transform. And it's already well in the process, as we probably all of us know that the world is in an awakening. It's in a metamorphosis process. And just as the brightest light creates the darkest shadows, we see a lot of troubles in the world, but all of that's being purged and cleaned. And in the long run, this subtlety, this grandness, this beauty will prevail. And we are all active participants, every one of us, in that process. So we are bringers of the light. We are bringers of the transmission. We are bringers of the grace. And yet we feel so hopeless at times. We feel helpless. We feel despair. We feel, I can't do it. We feel lost. No, we're not. We are still and will be, again, those great beings of light and love and beauty. And there's nothing to be afraid of.